The main way to describe this is it needs to be authentic. We'll always preach that. It needs to be an authentic story. It cannot be a scripted story. It needs to come from their heart.
Hello and welcome to Sidewalk Talk, Shovel the Sidewalks podcast, where the crew gets together to talk about what we're really passionate about. Today, we're going to be talking about a story that I actually wasn't a part of Shovel the Sidewalk at the time, but Jamie and Steve were able to get a story out of someone who works at ModPack. Her name was Myrna Valera, and she speaks English as a second language. So getting the story out of her was difficult um, just because of the language barrier. And they ran into some hiccups, but they were able to get a really good story out of them. And today we're going to go over that, and they're going to show me and tell me what they did and how they were able to, overcome some obstacles. So when it looked like they weren't even be able to get anything out of it, they actually did, in fact, get a really good story. So Steve, tell me about Myrna and how you guys began that recording process with her. This was a Mod Pack Spotlight video, correct?
Yeah, Myrna is a lovely lady from the Philippines. And like anybody, she was nervous
Hmm.
about not telling her story, but about, people that she really doesn't know, Jamie and I, and this camera in her face and a microphone and lights and all those things. So, and I thought that, and obviously English is her second language. So, and barely, right?
Yeah.
She spoke very she did not speak English very well. Um, uh, but enough that obviously she'd get by. She's an amazing person. Think
Mhm.
about being in, somewhere where you don't speak that language and everyone else around you does. And then you have to learn what to do. I don't remember what her job is. I don't know if you remember, Jamie, but I know she was on the floor at ModPack, and they love her. And so the reason we chose her, just like we choose anybody, is as we get to know, the client in this case, ModPack, it's folding cartons and stock packaging. As we got to know them better, they understand if we want to help recruit, and then retention's a secondary in this
Mhm.
situation. But if you want us to help recruit, we want to recruit people that are like your best employees. You want more employees like your best. So
Right.
why don't we tell the stories or let the people that tell their story, let them tell their own story, right? So if you want people like them, then let's talk to them. Let's let them talk. Let's have a conversation with them, right? That's the idea of this. It's a conversation. So we were setting up to have a conversation with Myrna. But the only way to record a conversation is to actually use equipment, right? And that
Yeah.
cameras tend to make people nervous. A microphone tends to make someone nervous. And it's our job to help them relax, help them to understand we're having a conversation. And in the end, this isn't live being broadcast all over the world. It's just a recording, and we may talk to you for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and we may use a minute and a half of what you say to help tell your story. Our labor comes afterwards. All things that we've talked about many times before. And this is the one time where I would say we failed it, yet we still succeeded. Okay, and let me explain that.
Yeah.
So, and it's what gives me confidence that we can talk to anybody because everybody has a story, and we'll be able to help them convey their story.
Mhm.
Because in this situation, we had somebody that was extremely nervous. She had somewhat of a panic attack and she could barely speak English. And I thought her story turned out wonderfully. It was beautiful. It was a great story and it showed her passion for what she does, her loyalty to her appreciation to
Mhm.
ModPack, and her pride in what she does, in her job, in accomplishing what she's accomplished, which is truly, truly amazing. Again, with someone that doesn't speak English very well. But so we did fail because uh, we went on the floor. I'm trying to remember, Jamie, you're going to have to step in, but I remember I'm trying. Jamie's recording. We're
We
trying
snuck
to
in. We
relax.
we we
Yeah,
we kind of we
we
were
tried everything to
yeah.
relax her. We put her in her
She was in her
environment, right? Because if you
she
get
was in her
someone in your,
environment.
that's when you tend to relax more. When you're sitting here, we got a camera and lights in your face and a microphone. You're human. You're going to get nervous. And if you're already nervous and you barely speak English, you're going to be even more nervous. All
Yeah.
right. And if you have anxiety, that can make it even worse. So it was an anxious moment. And so we tried to get her in her element on the floor, and we still weren't able to really get her to, oh, trust us and relax. Right,
Mm.
Jane? Wouldn't you say that?
Yeah, it was an interesting style because normally we're in a separate room, right? And this is the opportunity for somebody to share their story. They're not in their environment. And we later found out that it's actually better to go on the floor, right? Because
She taught
people are
us
more
that.
comfortable.
Oh,
But
That's
it's
what
okay.
she
just
taught
more
us. Yeah.
she really was the one that kind of helped set that going forward. But it's more of a visual, right? Just like the way that they were under the spotlight, and it's just a different scene. But ultimately, it doesn't matter if it looks cool if you can't get a good story out of somebody. So we decided to just kind of follow around the floor. She was talking with her manager, Dan, who was really helped the situation too because he made her feel comfortable. He was somebody that she knew, and I was just off to the kind of to the side recording as this was all happening. She was the only one that was mic'd up, right? Like she
Well,
was
that was
actually
the,
in her job.
but before that, when she was on the floor, it
Hmm.
still wasn't working. It's still, we
Well,
were
well,
still not
because I
able to
was
get,
in front. I
right.
was in the.
But,
Yeah.
but it was a conscious effort. We realized that she was nervous with me
Hmm.
Hmm.
and obviously with you with the camera. And Dan, she's no, I mean, she's worked there for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. She knows Dan, is comfortable with Dan. And so when you snuck, this was a conscious effort where you said, okay, I need to make sure she doesn't know I'm recording, even though she kind of does, but we're just not going to be in her face. And we told Dan, just go have a conversation. You're going to have to take over because this is the time. One time we say we were failing. We were unable to get her to relax enough to just be herself in some capacity to tell her story. And so Dan stepped in. That's when we started calling Dan Larry King
Yep.
because Dan stepped in and I just got out of the way. I was just like behind you trying to protect you from getting run over by something. We're on a floor
Yeah.
in a manufacturing plant, and Dan, because that was Dan's role. Now Dan became Larry King and just started having a conversation with her, and you were able to record, but she relaxed, right? She
Mm.
relaxed.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a very interesting experience for sure because yeah, it's not your typical like looking at the camera like it's a person, right? Because it's that employee when it's their spotlight, they're looking directly at the camera and sharing their story. But with this, it was like, let me hide behind this machine and angle it in a way where she can't tell. But ultimately, it shows that someone can share their story, number one, while being nervous. You can overcome that. She was able to overcome that with the help of Dan and just kind of like how we were recording it versus being upstairs. And number two, you don't necessarily need to be a perfect English speaker because it all comes out through passion and how she says what
Mm.
she's saying. It's not necessarily what she's saying, and you could tell that she was just a very passionate employee at ModPack, and I could see why they chose her as the spotlight for that time when we did record her. And it was just an interesting experience because we hadn't really went through something like that before.
The
Did
great
you
point
guys?
about,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
well, just to um, jump on what Jamie was saying, we always talk about this. It's more important, many times, it's more important how you say what you're saying than what you actually say,
Mm.
because it's all those other cues that people pick up on your passion, yeah, how passionate about your convictions, right? Are you all in on this? You can tell when someone is all in just by watching, their hand motions, but the tone of their voice and the way they're getting into it. And with Myrna in this situation, there were times, even in the recording that we used, where I really couldn't understand what she said.
Mm.
Only, so not only I didn't understand. I mean, it was somewhat broken English, but I understood what she was saying, even though I didn't understand the words. I could feel her passion. I just remember distinctively her appreciation for her teammates. She's a great member to have on your team, any team
Mm.
that you have. And also remember she didn't have any experience in manufacturing, so that made her even, at the beginning, I'm sure she was even more nervous, didn't really understand English, had to work through that and get, and understand what to do. And she's just a hard worker, and it's just so obvious. Anyone that can break through that barrier of having English as a second language and working in a place that speaks English, you got to give them credit. But just the way she talked, the way she approached things, you could feel her appreciation and her passion for what she did, even if you didn't understand everything she was saying.
Mm. Did you
Totally.
guys start with her in kind of like a conference room where it was like quiet? Is that like where you guys first started with the spotlight?
Did we go there second, or was that was the time we were doing that first? I know we were still able to pull, some sound bites of her story in the conference room.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's where it started.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's where it
it did,
started,
and
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 that's
it
where we
wasn't.
identified real quickly that oof, she's very nervous, and we're doing what we can to calm her down. And that was that audible we called like, hey, let's go on the floor, and it ended up working out.
Yeah,
Right.
we went on the floor and it still wasn't working. And then when Dan the man jumped in, Larry Kinged it.
Yep.
Then it worked out for us.
Because I
Because
know we.
again,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
sorry, Tim.
No, you're
Again,
good.
like when we mean it wasn't working on the floor, just so somebody that's listening can better understand, we had the camera directly like in front of her. So it was the act of being observed and having that camera directly in front of her. And the moment that Dan was in the situation talking with her, that's when we were able to kind of get her to calm down because she didn't realize, obviously. She may have realized actually that we were recording, but I wasn't like directly in her face like how we were in the conference room and, and other stories that we've recorded. It's like I'm like off on an angle and zooming in and trying to make it happen. So sacrifice a little visual for the audio.
So
So
it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind for that example.
exactly.
Okay.
It is, and that is what we try to do all the time
Hmm.
with anybody we work with, and that's what you should do if trying to get the subject to relax. The ideal way to do it, or the ideal thing to happen if you're recording content, an authentic story, is your goal is to help them. It's like they say the best umpires or best referees in football are the ones you don't notice,
Yep.
right? So same idea here. You want the person you're having the conversation with, the person who's the subject of the story, to not even realize you're recording, to be relaxed enough and trusting enough that, and you want to, that's why you want to get them in their element, because as they're talking and giving you their passion, um, they don't recognize that that camera's actually rolling. Also, why many times the best stuff is when we're done,
Mm.
which is also why we continue to record and they may not know it. And then you can use that in their story, right? How many times have we either at the beginning they didn't know we were rolling, or at the end they didn't know we were rolling and they were most passionate because they were the most relaxed because they didn't realize the camera was rolling. We've had it before, Jane, where we're 10 minutes in. They're like, "Are you guys going to start recording this soon?" We've been rolling for 10 minutes. We've already got our story and they didn't
Yep.
even know it, right? That's why we
Yeah.
don't say, and action.
Action.
I'm gonna go, okay, let's get ready. Get ready. Three, two, one. We don't do that, right? We just
Yep.
start talking. And when you're working long enough together, we each know what we're doing.
Hmm.
Like I know Jamie's already rolling when we're having our conversation. He knows what I'm trying to do when I'm having a conversation with somebody. He knows when to pick that stuff up. That just takes time of working together. So, but it's the goal is to try to get that person in their element as relaxed as possible. And in this situation, the only way to do that was for us to get out of her way. Just
Mm.
get out.
Yeah.
Literally, physically, we had to get out of her way and let just so she never had to see my face again and Dan the man jumps in and saves the day. And it was a really, really lovely story with a just a real great person. And I'm just so happy that we had that. And like I said before, that gives me the ultimate confidence that no matter what the situation is, we'll figure out a way to get that story because every story is worthy and there's a way to get it. If we can get someone that speaks English as a second language and is as nervous as she was for good reason for her to be nervous, then we can get a story out of we can get a story out of anybody. It's not I'm not talking about the ability to get the story. It's
Mm.
I have the confidence that we have the ability just to figure it out. I don't know what it's going to be, but we're going to figure it out in some way. So yeah, I'm not even saying because it is true. It's a skill. It's an art form of getting the subject to relax and not think about the cameras. That's an art form, but that's not even what I'm talking about. I just know that we'll figure it out like we did with Myrna. And that one was a weird one. We got out of the way, camera angle weird, someone else actually talking to her, and we salvaged a pretty good story. So I'm confident that we can do that anywhere at any time.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Yeah, it's the ability to think quickly, right? And just adapt. We love saying, let's call an audible.
Yep. I wrote that
That was a
down.
major that was a major audible. And yeah, you utilize the environment, right? Like we were able to utilize Dan because he was a familiar person for Myrna. And I think it's yeah, again, being able to adapt to these situations. And if we can get that story, we can get any story, like Steve said. So definitely definitely one for the Bucks that I'll always remember.
I think it's a really interesting concept, kind of getting other employees there involved, not just relying on us three or us two in the situation, trying to use any and all resources available to get a better story. I think it's a really cool example of that.
Well, even while Dan went from behind the scenes to in front, even the prep work in um, telling a story, it takes the team. Like it isn't up to us. It's not you and Jamie. It's not me, you and Jamie. It's really the team um, of opening up and helping us identify the people. We don't know. We don't work
Yeah,
there.
right.
So if you do work there, and you're trying to create this content, what you want to think about is who are, whose stories would be very, really valuable. Who are those best employees that we want the world to know about? We want to brag about them and we want others like them to join us. Those are the people that you want to identify and tell their story. And then the other thing it does is what we call the Hollywood effect. It tells that person, that employee, I don't like the teammate, the person
Mhm.
on your team that you want to highlight. It tells them how much you appreciate them. You want their story told. In essence, in marketing, you would say, we want you to represent our brand, right? But
Yeah,
it's really telling their story and having them represent the image of your company. I mean, it's a big thing. But then beyond that, however that story is being told, however it's implemented on the website, social media, whatever you're doing with it, um, well, they have family, they have friends, they have coworkers, they have peers who all want to see that person succeed and are all going to root for that person. And they're going to appreciate that. They're going to consume that particular story and love it. On social media, they may share it and like it. We've seen that many times. But they'll certainly have good feelings about the company that their friend, daughter, niece, whatever works for, and they'll tell others as well. They become great brand ambassadors. So your employees, your members of your team are just the best brand ambassadors, and you can leverage their family, their friends to be brand ambassadors as well. We're talking about employer brand in this
yeah.
situation.
It's a really good point. It's interesting to think about. So is there anything else that kind of stuck out particular about that shoot? I know kind of you guys getting out of the way was an interesting point. I think it's kind of interesting in trying different environments rather than thinking that, oh no, this isn't going to happen. What kind of drove you guys to think about using the floor? Was it, did she mention where she works and be like, okay, let's go try it out there? Or was there something that maybe she brought up that you guys kind of wanted to capitalize and thought, okay, maybe if we brought her down to where she's always working in that environment, maybe this will be kind of another option for us?
I personally cannot remember how it worked. I feel like
Mhm.
it was just an executive decision where we're like, let's go try the floor.
Yeah,
Um,
I think we could have tried. I think it was we need a new surrounding.
yeah.
gotcha.
We need something different because this wasn't working. And that could be for anybody, right? If it's not working, walk away, take a break, start over. You know what? Turn the camera off or keep it rolling.
Right.
And,
Say
and
you're
but
turning it
but
off.
go have a conversation with the person about anything but this.
Gotcha.
Just take a break, have them get some water, start over another, go to a different area. In this situation, it happened to be the floor, which was the best place to go because it was her environment. And I
Gotcha.
don't remember, James, if that's when we realized, what are we doing? We should always be in the person's environment. That's going to be their best
Yeah.
space.
I think the idea came from like the Nat sound breaks because we would always do that anyways, where we're like, all right, let's go get some B-roll. But we never really thought at that moment that a story could be recorded entirely on the floor because of the sound. I mean, it's heavy machinery. And I also think the upgrade of microphones over time, we use the wireless, which had that built-in ability to be able to kind of drown out the noise. But that story in particular, in my opinion, I think is what really paved the way for future stories where we got a lot of them on the floor instead of relying on that room where it's silent and it's just us in front of the or behind the camera while talking to them. So everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
Like that was meant, in my opinion, to happen so that we could be like, wow, we can get an entire story on the floor, and it's not the audio is not going to be affected. Like if anything, the audio is enhanced by having that nat sound built in the background with the machinery going and things going super fast. So it just adds to it because that's their environment. That's where
Yeah.
they work.
But now what it's led to is, that's an environment that has a lot of action, right? Which we like.
Yeah.
We like action. But even if we're telling a story of somebody that is a technical, they're an IT person or somebody that works at a computer, well, that is their space,
Yeah.
right? And so we have found that even though there's no action, it's like a very confined space. There'd probably be more room if we went into a conference room and got on a tripod, but it's not as good as them in their natural space where they're in there. You put a wireless on them and they can do whatever they got to do. It might be a little uncomfortable than
Mhm.
more so than it would be on a wide open floor, but it works. People in their natural habitat where they spend a lot of time, that's the best place to talk to them.
Really curious
Net,
because I know how we love natural sound that you can use natural sound to get someone to relax a little bit more because they're hearing stuff familiar around them nonstop while they're talking rather than just hearing only their voice or something like that. I think it's kind of a really interesting thing to think about. I like it.
I've noticed when we're at Mod Pack, we're on the floor and when we're talking to somebody, the people walking by, they do see the camera or whatever, right?
Oh yeah.
They're pumped. They get excited about it. They're like, "Yeah, way to go." And no one seems to be too nervous about that. But when we are in, like if we're at Copeland and we're talking to somebody and it's a very quiet
Yeah.
area and there's others there, that tends to make people a little bit, it would make me nervous.
Right.
Where like I remember when I was a sportscaster and we would be live. So I'd be at the anchor desk and it's just
Mhm.
me and a couple people and the camera crew. I mean, there's no nerves. It's like whatever. No, but even it doesn't matter how many thousands of people are watching. I can't see them,
Right.
right?
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm just my coworkers. But when we would go live on location and you got eyes on you that you don't know, that made me nervous. It wasn't like I wasn't in a comfort zone.
Yeah.
And you had to work your way through that because you're live. There's no teleprompter, but this person's staring at this person. What are you looking at? And so I would assume that when we're talking to people and they're in there and there's others around, that would make them, somewhat uncomfortable. Like,
Mhm.
do we, so I always try to, when we're in that situation, to try to observe, right? We've been in that situation where like, hey, let's go somewhere else, even though this might be their environment. Their coworkers are right there, and it's just somewhat uncomfortable. It depends. Sometimes it's great because they're
Yeah.
great support. They're laughing, they're having fun with it. Then you go with it. But if you can tell it's a little bit stressful, then I say change the environment and try something else. And I've always thought about that. So when I'm live, it's like, yeah,
Mm.
there's people you're just uncomfortable, that's just reading the room. You got to read the room and make, as Jamie says, call an audible, make a
Yeah.
decision, and make a decision because whatever the decision is, I always say, make a decision because it's the right decision. Doesn't matter. You're going to live with it.
Sure.
Have confidence that you're going to do the right thing. Most of the time you will. I mean,
Yeah.
we learned that with Myrna. We
Yeah.
took a shot. Well, let's just do something. We got to do something. Try it.
Yep.
And that's the only time we ever had to do that, but it worked out.
So is that the main lesson you guys think that came from this shoot was kind of always being able to adapt and just try it?
To me, it's about confidence.
Confidence. Okay.
This shoot, I don't know, can you be taught confidence? It gave me confidence. It helped me understand that we need to trust ourselves and trust our ability to call an audible and
Hmm.
make things happen. So it just, yeah, it
Yeah.
completely took confidence. I have no concern, no worries. I know that no matter what we're doing, we will get a story. We will get the story. If we've done that, we can do anything. So
Yeah.
that for me was the number one message is that if we are able to talk to somebody who doesn't speak English very well and is really uncomfortable, and we're able to call multiple audibles to actually get out of her face completely and have someone else actually conduct the interview for us, and still be able to, because a lot of our work is in post-production, right? Still be able
Yeah.
to review everything we have and turn it into really her story and a good story that represents her well and shows her passion, her convictions, her appreciation for her teammates and for ModPack, the company. And then we can do anything. We can do any story, anytime, anywhere. That's what it gave me.
Awesome.
Well said, Steve. I'll say the takeaway if it's somebody that is a marketing professional within a business, or if you're thinking about hiring a marketing professional, if you're in this sort of situation and it's not working, change the environment. You can't force a story out of somebody. You can't force content. Change the environment, read the room, and um and if it has to deal with just somebody that's just uncomfortable because they're not familiar with the person that's recording or asking the questions, then have one of your team members be involved because it's about getting somebody relaxed. You could have the best equipment, you can have the best story, but if you can't get it out of somebody, then there's no way that you can share it with the world because it wasn't properly said by the person. So you can't force these kind of things. The main way to describe this is it needs to be authentic. We'll always preach
Hmm.
that. It needs to be an authentic story. It cannot be a scripted story. It needs to come from their heart.
Awesome. So read the room and act with confidence. Awesome. Well, thanks for listening and checking this out, everyone. Or not everyone, just whoever's listening. Thank you very much. And Steve, Jamie, thank you so much for telling me this story because I think it's very valuable. And I think a lot of people hearing that can take some valuable lessons away from it. So thanks, guys.